Yeah.
Alrighty. Is that are those National Geographics behind you?
Yes, they are.
Wow, that's almost as big as the Nintendo Power collection I had when I was a kid.
Well, that is actually a small fraction.
Wow. So
When I was young, so I grew up on a farm, and we didn't have all that much in the way of, movies, television, books. Even, well, my dad had tons of books, and he was a great lover of literature, and so there was always books, but it was not the kind of books I was interested in when I was young. I didn't really want to study Russian history when I was 10 years old, but I did realize that National Geographic was a thing, and so I saw like a cousin with something, and all these pictures of these animals in Africa, and I was like, "Wow, what is this? How do I get this?" And so, pretty young, I got a subscription to it, and every month this National Geographic would come, and I got them since from 10 to 20 or something like that. So I don't know how many we have at the farm here, but there's a lot.
wow, see, I just wanted to know how to get 30 lives in Contra, so that's why I got a Nintendo Power subscription back in the day. Hey, what's up, bookworms? We are back with another Talk About Nothing. And this time, instead of a fellow content creator, we've got a content creator, just not on the YouTube. This is published author Richard Nell, the author of the Ash and Sand trilogy. And I'm sorry, I know your name is Richard Nell, but I always want to say Richard Nail because it sounds like just like a superhero name. So is that the first time that's
That
ever happened?
that would be a better last name, and I'm sorry that I have the name Nell now. So
It's pretty good. So on your Goodreads page, I believe it says he freaked his family out when he decided to become a full-time writer. Is it still like that, or do you think your family's kind of settled in a little bit now?
Uh, well, as a general rule in life, my family just sort of learns to accept whatever stupid thing I do. Like that's been going on for 20 years, 25 years. Oh Christ, I'm old. Um, so yeah, they kind of just shrugged their shoulders when I told my parents, because before this, I had a very respectable job. I was a perfectly respectable human being who put on a suit and went to work every day. And out of the blue, I basically just sat my parents down because they're pretty practical people, and I knew that they would have sort of heart palpitations. And I said, I'm quitting my job to write books. And they sort of just looked at me and they said, yeah, you're going to do it. And we know there's nothing we can say. So good luck.
Wow, I got to get one of those. Everything I say I'm going to do, my family contradicts the hell out of me. So that's pretty impressive support system you got there. I admire that. They just let you do what you're going to do, huh?
Yes, they are wonderful parents. My mother is passed now, but my father, yep, he was, even though he's a very practical man, he just thought, look, I know you're going to do whatever you're going to do. Partially because that's what he was like when he was young. He grew up on a farm. One day he told his father, hey, Dad, I'm not going to be taking over the farm. He was the eldest son. I'm going to university and I'm going to be a physicist. And, so he knew that was stupid. That was crazy in terms of a farm kid from Saskatchewan who told his dad that he's going to do that. So he understood that that's what I was basically doing and was like, well, what can I say? That's what I did to my dad. So good luck.
Well, I guess it worked out. You got what, 5 books out. You got the trilogy, and you're working on the. I guess it's a secondary series in the same universe, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it'll be another trilogy that follows the events of this one.
And you're writing fast. That's something that's rare in fantasy these days. You're writing
Am
quite
I?
fast. I mean, I
It
think
doesn't
so.
feel fast. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I do like the joke that the Ash and Sand trilogy is longer than Lord of the Rings. So that.
So is the
What I
book
think.
I'm reading right now. This single book by Tad Williams is longer than
Oh
Lord of the Rings.
God.
So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I don't, but I don't think I'll ever write books longer than trilogies. Like I like endings.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap things up. And then if I want to start a new story in the universe, then I'll just create a new book or a new trilogy, and it'll have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then I'll finish it and I'll start a new one.
Boy, that's so admirable. Because I said, as a fantasy consumer, I would love more trilogies because I hate that. It seems like every new series that comes out now, it's book one of a planned 9-book series. I'm like, you have a
It's
roadmap for this, or you just want to put out 9 books? I'm just like,
it's
geez, man, come on, give me a trilogy. So trilogies are becoming more like the unicorn that standalones used to be, which are non-existent now. So
yeah.
that's great. I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a fantasy reader too, and I just think I don't like 9-book series for the most part, unless the only way I'm going to start a 9-book series is if it's my favorite author. Do you know what I mean? Like if I have loved some book by this guy and I trust him and I know he's going to do a good job and he's going to, land the ending and then I'll do it. But other than that, I just don't trust it. And I'm not willing to invest that much effort in. I want, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. I want beginning, middle, end your goddamn stories. So I don't know. That's just how I think.
No, I think that wisdom would have been nice when I first started this channel based off reading Wheel of Time. So it was like, when everybody was telling me, oh yeah, 4 books in the middle are pretty boring. I'm like, oh, great. Because they're not small books, but yeah. I'm at the point now where I've said after I'm trying to finish up this Malazan series, which is 10 books. I'm just like, I got to go back to trilogies, peak 5 books. I mean, unless, like you say, it's an author I absolutely adore. I say, and then I started this Will White series. It's just 12 books, but they're super small, so I can still make excuses. I need my Dresden Files replacement for right now. But as far as Ash and Sand, I was actually introduced to this funny because back when I was still on Twitter, which I'm sure will come up once or twice, I actually just had asked people. I was like, hey, this has got really good reviews on Goodreads. Have any of you guys, it's like a self-published author, any of you guys ever heard of it? And you actually respond, yeah, I've heard of it. I said, wow, okay, that's great. And you actually sent me the first one. And then the sad part of the story is you sent me all 3 of them, and I only read the first one because I'm a bad person. But I do have them on the schedule for this fall, and I'm very excited to do it. So I want to see if all the bad stuff that we say about Twitter, there are some good things that came out of it, like that. I met you, I met Mr. Rockio, other people that I've become, I email pen pals with, I guess you'd say. And I think that's a really great part of it. So there are still some decent people on the internet, right?
Yes, there are. Well, I guess I have 2 things I want to say. First is that you should never feel bad. I always say that. I keep saying this to bloggers and reviewers, like, do not feel bad. I know you have about 17,000 books. I know that there are an endless stream of writers, and we're all like, hey, read my stuff. I'm the most important thing. Read my stuff. And it's impossible. I read like 1 book a month.
I read more, but I don't write. So I have more time to read.
I have no idea how you people read as many books as you read. Never mind make the videos, never mind do the interviews and all that. And you're not getting paid. I mean, I know there's a bit of money in YouTube, but until you got about 500,000 subscribers, you're not quitting your day job. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. No, it's one of those things. Like I said, I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't do a lot of social media outside of just like, marketing, promoting the channel. So, I don't doom scroll about everything that's wrong with the world. That saves about, at least a couple hours per day that people spend on that, or Facebook, things like that. If I watch TV, it's watching a movie with my kid, or if my wife wants to binge a show, and we'll go months between watching anything together. So really,
well, that's the thing. If you've got family, you've got kids, like you're always sort of, what am I going to spend my time on? Am I going to spend it doing with something with my kids? Am I going to do something with my wife? So you're always sacrificing for these types of things. And people need to understand that, whether it's writing, whether it's any kind of hobby like this, it takes work. There's just no question. So don't feel bad. And I think most writers, this is just the cost of doing business. When we send you a book, we're not like, there's no expectation that you're going to read that book and that you owe us something. It's like, no, you do this. And if you read it and if you review it, you are helping me. So thank you. Here's a possibility. It's like when you get swag at a convention or something like that, it's kind of a gift. That's how I see it. It's just the cost of doing business.
Well, the way I look at it is I put awareness on these things by showing people that you have like the best cover art that there is out there. So I hope you've given your cover artist a high five.
Derek Murphy is his name. And actually, he's just a fascinating, bizarre, weird creature. He's a self-published
artist.
Yes. I love artists. Well, usually I don't like working with them that much. This guy's a bit of a different story because, like me, I know myself. I'm the worst employee in the world. When somebody tells me to do something, I just think maybe I'm going to do it how I want to do it, and I don't like deadlines. And I'm a weird. I go off on my own tangent creature. That's how most artists are. Anyway, this guy, he's a self-published sort of guru. He does it all. He does covers. He writes. He does marketing. He does everything you can imagine. And he's written books anywhere from like mermaid romance to lit RPG. He's just a wonderful creature. And he did these covers. And the reason that I went to him initially is because he was the kind of guy who would say, look, I can help you make a cover that will sell books. It's not maybe going to be a piece of art that if somebody were to blow it up and put it on the wall is going to be as good as something, but it will help you with selling books.
That's I mean, that's marketing 101 right there, right? I mean, I always say don't judge a book by its cover unless it's awesome. And those covers are awesome. Yeah. Something I got to say that I admire that you did in book 2, because I picked up book 2 the other day.
Okay.
And I was like, man, I read book 1 in December of 2020. Oh my God, thank you so much for putting a summary at the beginning of book number 2. I wish more authors did this. It's when you have these long waits sometimes between some of these epic fantasy books and you read as much as some of us do, it's just like, it's hard to keep some of this straight. So I first noticed it, I think, with Lycanius, as James Islington did that really, really well. And yeah, it was, I was very thankful because I was picking the brains of some people on the Discord that read book 1. They're like, can you remind me what happened to Kale at the end of this and stuff like that? So it's very helpful. So I hope that's a trend that picks up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I can't take much credit for that. It was really sort of reviewers and bloggers who kept telling me that I'd met, hey, you should do this. It might have been Patrick Leo, might have been Mahir Wanshu, I can't remember, but they were saying, hey, do a synopsis. Hey. And eventually they made me do it. So
yes, Patrick was the one who dropped in and said, I can't believe you didn't read books 2 and 3. They're way better than book 1. I was like, okay. So
that's funny. Well, and this trilogy in particular, it is kind of meant to be read back to back. Yeah. Like there is a lot going on in book 1 that moves to book 2 that's kind of sneaky. And so it is much better if you kind of remember what was happening. But I realize people way goes on to way, and they move on and they come back. So yeah, the synopsis is really good, and hopefully it helps. I don't know.
Well, it's not as long as book 1, so that's good.
It's actually longer.
Is it? Okay, I think I was looking at what book 3, I think is a little shorter, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
it's weird. It seems like it usually goes the other way. Each book's about 5% bigger, it seems like, with these. But
I know. But for me, conclusions, they should be sort of frantically paced. You know, like when you get to the end of a series or end of a book, it's always faster, right? You're running towards the conclusion. So to me, it just somehow when I was writing it, it got shorter because the pace is quicker.
All right. Well, how about some real fun questions here? Like you said, you read about 1 book a month. Most authors that I've talked to in this channel have told me they don't read while they're writing. Do you do this though?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And actually, it's probably not true that I read 1 book a month. I bet it's much higher than that. The thing is, I rarely finish books. I'm just ADHD when it comes to fiction. If there's so many things that trigger me that I think, okay, I've learned enough. I've gotten the point of this book and I don't need to continue. Toss it, get a new one. And sometimes I'll skip to read the end. If once I've seen the strings, this is one of the banes of being a fiction writer. It kind of ruins reading fiction for you because you always see the strings. Somebody will foreshadow something and you're like, well, I know how the book ends.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm an along for the ride type reader, but I do know that there's a lot of books from people are like, you didn't see that coming. Everybody saw that. I was like, I didn't see that coming, but yeah, I can see that. But yeah, that's the same thing that my wife does. It makes me call her like evil because she'll skip and read the last chapter of a book sometime. What are you doing right now? She's like, I just got to know. Yeah.
Yes, I have always done that. You remember those choose your own adventure books?
Oh yeah.
I would flip around until I found the right path, and then I'd like work my way backwards. Like I'm just the worst for that. So I don't like it when readers do that. So what can I say?
So do you watch Return of the Jedi first and then Empire Strikes Back, or
no? You know what? With movies, I'm quite a good, obedient little viewer. I do what I'm supposed to do, but with books, I don't follow the rules. And I like when I'm reading, I like the weirdest shit you can imagine. I don't read that much sort of standard fantasy these days.
That was my next question. Okay.
Yeah, I seek out the weirdos. You'll notice this is a theme in my life. I want to find the guys doing the weirdest, craziest shit you've ever seen on indie. The traditionally published stuff. Not that it's bad, and I have no criticism of it. I'm just saying the market in traditional published, they're not really risk takers anymore. Because of financial reasons, they're trying to put out stuff that sort of suits the genres that are already pre-established, that they know are going to make money. Whereas there's guys in the indie market doing the stuff that's just ridiculous, and I love to find those guys. I'm like new weird, I'm trying to think of a guy, Carlton Mellick, I think, who wrote classics such as The Haunted Vagina, or the Cuddly Holocaust.
I didn't think we were gonna get weird to the mermaid fantasy, but this is getting out there.
Oh, you can get so much weirder than mermaid. That's nothing. So this is what I like to read these days. I'm always looking for new ideas. I'm looking for crazy shit, because I think that's what makes fiction for me so wonderful. To find something that blows my mind, to find something where I think, whoa, what the hell is this guy doing? And then I can try and incorporate that and make it accessible. I like to take weirdness and stuff that your typical fantasy reader is not going to have read before, and bring that into a more, I don't know, standard epic formats or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same way with content creation. Is you will see there's a lot of people who used to be mavericky, kind of like I am, where they'll talk about whatever they want. Then they got bigger audiences, and you could tell it's like, okay, they're doing this for a job. They need to get a certain amount of views to make money for living. I have an actual job, so this can just stay a hobby for me. So yeah, I can definitely see that side of it. There's a lot of formulaic kind of stuff going on out there, and I can see that very much.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
Sure.
How I know there's incentives, in whether you're making videos, you're making books. How much of that affects you? Like, I assume by now you must realize, okay, this type of video gets this many views and this many clicks, and this type of video what does that do to you? What percentage do you sway your sort of video making that way?
I mean, I'm always the type of say I'll do what my viewers want to see. But there is some stuff where I'm like, if I'm not interested in that, like One Piece manga, I'm not going to do that. I have no interest in that. So I'm not going to do that, even though I know it would get ridiculous traffic and my channel would probably be 3 times bigger than it is now. But I always said I was never going to bullshit people. I was never going to be someone that I wasn't on this channel. I'm going to talk about the stuff I want to talk about, but there are certain points where I'm like, okay, people aren't interested in that. Why are you talking about it? So there's a balance there. Like, I love Stephen King. I'm going to keep talking about Stephen King, even if it doesn't do huge numbers like fantasy does or whatever. But people love them some like TBRs and book hauls and stuff like that, which are fun to do.
Yeah.
But I started this doing reviews. I still want to do reviews, but those people these days, it used to be they would listen to a review to know if they should read it or not. Now they will only listen to it if they've read it. So
that's funny.
All right. So you guys told me to quit doing spoiler reviews so you could watch them, but now you're saying you're not going to watch them unless you've read it.
So
and then you're upset that I didn't talk spoilers. So yeah, there's a fine line there, but the core audience has been with me the longest. They appreciate that I'm never going to do, the goofy singing and dancing and all that kind of stuff that some of these people that are really more entertainers. I was like, I'm a voice guy. I'm going to have one fixed camera angle. I'm going to tell you what was good and what wasn't about this book and stuff.
Yes, though, I've watched some of your videos now, and it's clear you have a talent to sort of a gift for gab. You're able to just speak. So you have your entertainer talent. There's no question about that. But it's not, I know what you mean. You're not going to be cutting your videos and putting on costumes and you're not into
I actually recorded when I just did that review of the Batman, and I actually recorded an intro wearing a Batman mask, and I just said, this isn't me. I can't do it. I can't upload this. So I need to make a blooper reel, I think, maybe.
Well, and, maybe over time you'll sort of adapt a little bit, but you can't, if you do things that you don't want to do, even if you get more views in the short term, the midterm, you'll burn out. You won't want to do it. And you'll stop doing it eventually, unless you're making tons of money.
Well, that's not happening. So hey, let's talk influences here. Okay, so I ask any author I get on here, or even just anybody on Talk About Nothing, what are some books that really influenced you growing up, coming of age, all that kind of stuff. And besides Tolkien, because I know everybody's got to say Tolkien. We all got an interest in fantasy because Tolkien, so that's like the given. But besides Tolkien.
Well, partially, I knew you'd ask this question. I should maybe first say that writers despise this question. Oh yeah, they always come up with something because where we know the question's coming and we have to come up with something. But the problem is most writers and most artists in general, we have no idea. There's sort of like this primordial ooze that just kind of forms around your brain, and everything just kind of goes into it, whether it's books you've read or movies you've watched or what's going on in the culture, or and it just kind of all gets stirred up, and people call it different things, maybe the muse or whatever. And this is why writer's block sort of terrifies people so much, because they have no idea what is making that ooze bubble things up. They don't know where the stories come from. They don't know where the inspiration comes from. So when you say like, what is an inspiration? You're going, I think it's this today. I might have had this in my mind, but I always say with writing, there's what you tried to do, there's what you think you did, and then there's what you actually did. And it takes readers to read your book and say, hey, you've created, Conan the Barbarian meets Hannibal Lecter. And you think, wow, that guy gets it. But I could have never come up with that. Like, I sort of don't know what I'm doing when I'm doing. Having said all that, I do have some props here. I happen to be at my old family farm where this, I got like a background saved in the background here, but, and I've got a bunch of books from when I was a kid. And I was just looking through these books and I found what is, this is all that's left of it. Oh, you can't even see it. It's 20,000
nice.
Leagues Under the Sea. It's just the front cover that's just falling apart. The book is carded. This was one of my favorite books when I was a kid. And I don't know how many times I read it when I was that age, but that was one. I've got a David Gemmell book here. Here in the shadows, I think it's called. Yeah, this is not working at all to show his book.
An author that I get recommended a lot is Gemmell. After I said I really like John Gwynne, a lot of people said, love David Gemmell. So I've got your eye.
He does sort of epic fantasy. He's the classic epic fantasy guy. You want to drip a single tear for the heroism of the great man standing on the wall fighting off the invaders. Gemmell's your man.
It's kind of my brand. Yeah, I'm here.
And I know this guy's out of fashion, but Terry Goodkind. I can't even say it. When I was young, I liked him. I only got about 4 books into the whatever it is, the
Sword of Truth.
What's that series called?
Sword of Truth.
Yes, Sword of Truth. At which point I have the same criticisms that many people do. It got preachy, and I don't like that. Nobody does. But that was a big one. R.A. Salvatore, is that how you say it?
I've always said Salvatore, but I've only read his Star Wars books. So
okay, I love the like sort of D&D books, the Dritz, the Warden, and all that stuff.
That gets recommended to me a lot. Yeah.
So that's when I was young. Those were the influences. But at some point, I moved into more grimdark stuff. I got to Mark Lawrence. I got to George Martin. And George Martin, I would say, is probably the biggest modern influence.
Sure.
When Stark got his head cut off, I was absolutely floored. I thought, who is this guy, and how did he do this? How is he able to get away with this?
I got these stories too. I remember reading A Game of Thrones for the first time in the year 2000. So long before this was a pop culture thing, right? So I was reading that book and I'm like, Ned, this is a guy I'm going to follow this whole series. It's going to be great. When that happened, I threw the fucking book across the room, ran across the room to pick it up to keep reading because it was so good. But I was so mad. I'd never seen anything like that at the time. You're going to kill your main character? Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And I wasn't like you yet. That didn't make me mad. I was actually blown away by that he would do this and get away with it. I just thought that's unbelievable. I was mad. I guess we're just doing spoilers. Who cares? Sorry. If you don't know how
guys, it's such a pop culture. That's like saying, oh, I can't believe you said Darth Vader was Luke's dad. I mean, come on.
Yeah. When he killed, oh shit, not John, Rob. When he killed Rob Stark, I was like, fuck you.
I said that that was the one where I was just like emotionally exhausted. And I just like put the book down, kind of like stare at the wall for like an hour. Yeah. I got to read those first 3 back to back to back. And then I've been doing the 20-year waiting game, everybody else. So everybody likes to, bust on George, myself included, about, how long he's taken to write these. But those books were incredible. I mean, there's a reason that the show was good when it was good, because it was following that source material, which was just incredible. So.
Yeah, I've spent probably 30 minutes in some other podcast like defending George Martin, even though I have the same criticisms that you have and everybody else. Sure. But if I was maybe to cut it down to a brief summary, what I would say is, look, guys, he's not writing a shallow 30-minute TV show. Okay, he's writing Beethoven's Fifth, and that takes time. It's hard, and he may never finish it. And it's not because he doesn't want to; it's because he may not be able to. And I assure you, the greatest tragedy and the person who will be the most disappointed will be him. So let's all just cheer for him. I agree that he's put on too much on his plate, and he's but partially, he's probably trying to fill the tank. When you're trying to write these big difficult novels, you need enough in the tank creatively to produce it. And I suspect that he has made his problem so complicated that he's not able to solve it. And he's looking for the inspiration, and he's looking for ways to solve the problems that he's created. And he's failing. And, maybe he needs help. Maybe he needs a Brandon Sanderson at his side. I don't know. Maybe he needs somebody to sort of help him spitball through this. And I don't know.
I've said myself that regardless of any of these things, and anyway, say it's still one of my favorite authors ever, and that's still one of the best series ever, even incomplete. So nothing but respect for me there.
He's probably the greatest living fantasy writer. I mean,
they call him the American Tolkien for a while there, before the series even came out. So yeah,
yes,
for a reason. Now, when you mentioned earlier that you kind of are more of a grimdark guy, it's kind of funny because one of our earlier email interactions, I said, when I was reading the book, I was like, so have you read Joe Abercrombie's The First Law? Because this really makes me feel like, you said, I never really actually meant to go into a grimdark thing. I'm like, you have someone eating a child on page 1. You knew what you were doing here. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I did and I didn't. I knew that was going to be attention capturing. Okay. There's no question about that. And that was the point. The point was to splice, like, look, here's this kid who is eating someone. And now we're going to go back and show you what a nice kid he was. Right. So that was the point. And the idea is, well, how the hell did this nice kid go from this to chomping down on somebody in a field? So that it's attention grabbing. But no, I didn't know what grimdark was. And the setting of the books is really just I'm a history geek. So it's really me just trying to capture Iron Age philosophy and Iron Age technology accurately. That's really all it is. And in some ways, I assure you, I pulled my punches. Nothing is more grimdark than history.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, that's a great answer. So have you ever read First Law?
yeah, I have. Yes. But
I said when I reviewed was it Kings of Paradise? I want to make sure I got the right one there. Kings of Paradise. I said it was probably the most grimdark I had felt since Westeros or Adua from First Law. And I think personally, I think that's one of the best compliments that you can have coming from me, obviously, because I love those worlds, even though I would never set foot in them. People all the time, hey, if you could live in any fantasy world, would it be? Well, not that one. No. History will show you this, and that will show you that. I'm fine with being right now, right here, right now. I'm fine with it. So yeah.
Well, that's funny because literally one of the reasons that I write fantasy the way that I do is I'm sort of trying to tell people life is pretty good. You could live in this world. You could have to make the choices that these characters have to make. You could have the technology level that these people have and the socio-political economic models that these people have. And you do not want that. So as tough as things might seem to you in the modern world, and of course people can have their own personal tragedies, and I would never dismiss those, but just as a world situation, life is good.
I'll always say any place where I can wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and if I'm hungry, I can go somewhere and get some food. I'm okay.
Refrigeration,
or a nice coffee. I'm
happy.
Yeah.
The electricity works.
Yeah, and you know what? I live in Texas. Air conditioning. I love me some air conditioning. Hey, yes. You got a question about Texas, I think, right?
Well, so we are in the process of moving, actually.
No kidding.
So I live in Canada, what I like to call the Texas of Canada, which is Saskatchewan, which is not a slight against either of those places.
Why? Is it the biggest, or do you guys like guns? What's the deal?
Yes, well, it's sort of the Midwest. And, people would call us a flyover state, basically, if we lived in the United States. It's flat. It's the people here are the people who, it's sort of the last West, the people wear cowboy hats and cowboy boots, and everybody's got a truck, and we all have guns, and Our family's got 7 guns approximately. So yes, we are like Texans. There's no question. I've got rancher uncles. I've got farmer uncles. Everybody's got a farmer somewhere in the family, just about, if they're
You
from
guys
here.
get rodeo out there?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. And every year we have agribition. Where people come and to show off their farming equipment, and people come from miles around to this great farming event. So it's changed a bit in my lifetime. We've got a lot more immigration now. And so, we've got people from all over the world. But it used to be much more very specific cultures, very Western, very pioneer oriented place. Anyway, we are moving. My wife is actually a nurse, and she got a job in Texas. So we are moving to just a couple hours west of Dallas.
Okay. Yeah, they're very good medical places, and I mean Houston Methodist obviously is one of the biggest in the country. So, yeah, I've heard all over the state. There's people that do internships all over the place. I know like it's funny. I know like 3 or 4 doctors, but I never, they're never here when I need them. But yeah, the law and medical is really big out here. It really is.
Right.
So it's a business capital. Houston is obviously, but where you're headed, I'm not too sure too much about what's west of Dallas until you get to like El Paso.
It's a small place. It's a couple 100,000 people. It's
But I do
it's
know
even
if you're looking for that pioneer lifestyle, it's still there in West Texas.
absolutely, yeah. Well, I'm excited.
Well, all them stereotypes about everybody wears boots and they ride their horses to work and stuff, that actually does happen, just not in Houston. Houston is as metropolitan as New York City.
Right.
You go West Texas though, and yeah, it's 1885 out there. Yeah. So.
Yes.
So I think you'll be happy. You probably will have an actual blacksmith. If you we have open carry in Texas where you can carry swords and spears, so you might actually have a blacksmith that can do the horseshoes if you need to. So
well, let's put it this way: we have a sword in the family. It's a family heirloom. It comes from, I don't know, 1700 and something. My great grandfather was a cavalryman, and he's got a saber. So it won't be shocking to me. Let's put it
nice.
that way.
So if you go to the grocery store and you need to get that can of corn that's up on the top shelf, just take the sword down, just knock it down.
Good.
Right in your basket.
Perfect.
That's great. Yeah, perfect.
Well, I feel like I'll be at home.
That's exciting. I mean, you're going to go from the great frigid white north to holy hell, it's hot here. So
yeah, I'm a little worried about that. It's minus 30 right now Celsius, so it's close to that in Fahrenheit. Yeah, so it's cold right now, and I'm going to get to Texas, and it's going to be like plus 25 or something.
We're not like me, but we're in Houston. We're about 50 miles from the coast, so we get all that humidity. You won't get as much humidity, but it will still be hot. But you're probably going to be a place where it actually does still, like North Texas, does still get snow and stuff like that. It's just hot 9 months of the year. So
right.
In Houston, it's about 11 months of the year. So, but you know what? That's why I live in the South. I don't like the cold. Forget it. Sorry, I don't.
Yeah, well, here it's cold 9 months a year, so it'll be a nice change.
It will be a nice change. You'll get a little blonde streaks in your hair and stuff from the sun. It's gonna be exciting, right?
What's left of it, yeah.
So I mean, so you're excited about this though?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm, as you can probably see from the job change, every 5, 6, 7 years, I like to just change everything. I moved to Australia when I was in university. I sort of went, what's the farthest place away from where I am now? Okay, it's Australia. I'll go there. Now I've never lived in the States. So I just want to do that. I want to travel around a bit. It's such a big country. There's so much going on. It's so funny because most Canadians, we have this view of the States that's kind of like this monoculture, that it's like this is an American, right? And it's like, it's so not true. There are so many different, they have everything, you've got from the west coast to the East Coast, everything between. You've got so many different kinds of people that trying to describe America, it's 300 million people. I mean, so I just want to experience a bit of it. I want to go around.
I can't say we're not guilty of that as well. I think South Park hasn't done very much to help the, our idea of what Canadians are like, but I'm glad to see your head doesn't, pop like so,
to be fair,
that's exciting, man. I'm excited for you. That's great. When I talked to, it's funny you said that, because when I talked to Jay Kristoff, who was in Australia, he was saying that he had been touring in the States, and he said that of all the places he visited, he felt like Texas was the most like Australia, except that everything wasn't trying to kill you like it is in Australia. So that's a neat comparison there. So I didn't know that these kind of places existed in Canada. So you're teaching me stuff now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the big, how would I describe it? The big thing in Canada, really, there's more than this, obviously, but the big thing is East and West. So in the East, you've got sort of the French speakers. And you've got the more metropolitan, more sort of initial Canadian landing, Canadian civilization. And in the West, you've got the outback of of Canada. You've got the Western culture, the country culture, and we hate the people in the East. And we don't speak French, and we don't agree with anything that they say, and we always vote against them. And if we could, we'd probably separate, and we're sort of moving in that direction. It's just funny that distinction.
Yeah, every election, Texas is going to secede from the Union, so
Yeah.
you'll fit right in. It'll be great. You'll
Yes,
love
we're
it.
sort of like that. It never
And
happens.
the Dallas-Houston rivalry is one of those things where it's like we hate each other, but as soon as someone outside of Texas says like, "Hey, you can't talk about Texas that way,"
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. It's a little biased, but yeah, I love it here. There's no state tax, so you're gonna love that part. No state
That to
tax
me, that's mind-boggling. We pay so much tax in Canada. Like we worked this out as we were trying to figure out how to get into the state. I don't even know what to do with that. It blows my mind.
You'll have all these athletes who will go play on the coasts, but they'll live in Texas because they get to keep 28% of their paycheck stuff. So
Yeah. Well, you have fairly high federal tax, yes?
8.5% or 8.25
Okay,
actually,
never
but
mind.
yeah, nothing like I've seen elsewhere, and you'd be surprised at the end of the year how much of a difference that it makes. So
Oh,
I always said, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and moved out here. Well, my mom wanted to be closer to her sister who had cancer, and so I always said, after high school, I'm moving back to Georgia, and I got my first job, and I saw like the paychecks and stuff. I was like, I'm okay here, yeah. So hey, it's still got warm weather, no state tax. I'm good. I'm good here. So yeah,
right.
Texas
So
and
okay,
Florida.
so you're from Houston, and it's a very metropolitan place. How big is it? How many people?
Houston, I couldn't tell you how many million. We had a lot after Hurricane Katrina did a number on Louisiana. We got a lot of transplants from Louisiana here, and they realized how nice it was here, and they stayed. So I couldn't tell you the actual number, but last I checked, it was still fourth biggest behind New York, Chicago,
Wow.
LA, and us. So yeah, and everybody's leaving LA now and coming
Yeah.
to Texas. So I'm pretty sure we might actually get the third eventually. So
That's
yeah.
funny. Well, I where I'm from, there's only a few 100,000 people, and to me, that's like a city.
Well, where you're
That's
going, it sounds like you might still see that. But yeah, Houston, it's 12 million people, something like that. It's nuts. It's
yeah. Well, my wife is from the Philippines, and when we first started dating, and I was saying, "Oh, where are you from?" She says, "Oh, from a sort of a town in the Philippines called Pampanga." And I say, "Oh, okay, cool. And how many people live there? 1 million." I'm like, a town? What? That's not a town. That's a giant city. And she says, well, it's not like the main Filipino city, which is 25 million. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay.
Is there really that many people on that island? I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. It's Manila is 25 million.
Wow.
And when I went there to visit her family and to see them all, they took me to Manila, and I'm just like clutching, just like, Jesus Christ. It's so like the roads are insane. There's like horses here, and there's buses here, and they're completely out of control. There's no traffic lights. There's just driving everywhere. It's madness.
So we're in the same age bracket, same age range, I believe. So we probably grew up on a lot of the same things, regardless of it being states in Canada. There are some things that just, they know no boundaries. Favorite Star Wars movie?
Oof. I mean, I think the original trilogy is
Sure.
still my favorite. I probably have to go with Return of the Jedi, just because Jedi's are so cool.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget the Luke gaining all of his powers and becoming the hero that we all know and love. At least we all knew and loved until they ruined it.
Yes.
I haven't actually seen the new Star Wars movies. I've seen bits and pieces of them.
Man, you're so lucky. I was so
just
excited.
stopped. I
Yeah.
just couldn't do it.
It was, the only thing was, it's like the prequels broke my heart, and this like was on a level that was completely like, it makes it seem like, it almost makes you seem like nostalgic for the prequels
Oh yeah.
after seeing those movies. So yeah.
Well, I knew that something bad was going to happen. I sort of sensed it. I just felt it in the air, and I watched reviews, and I with some trusted voices, and I let them ruin it for me. And then I watched bits and pieces, and I thought, no, I'm just not going to do it.
I I let my guard down. I believed that
Oh,
George had gotten long in the tooth and he didn't understand what the fans wanted anymore. And this was going to be better because I was like, look what Disney's doing with Marvel. They know how to give the audiences what they want. And then I realized, well, Kevin Feige knows how to give the fans what they want. The people in charge of Lucasfilm clearly did not. And
I still
yeah,
saw the first one. Is the first one where they kill Solo?
yeah. Uh-huh.
I saw that and I knew it was over. I knew the way that it's
Yeah, I
not
was
that he
still
died.
optimistic. I think if you had told me before this started that you're going to get those three main actors together, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford, and you're not going to let them have a scene together, I just said, who in the hell is control of this? Because the comparison I made is like, that was like getting the Beatles back together and making them record solo albums.
Yeah.
What are you
Yeah.
doing? So, I mean, not even one scene together. That's insane.
No, I can fairly quickly summarize why these movies were so bad, and without even having seen the other ones. But people often complain about the plot, which of course is ridiculously stupid. But the plot of Star Wars was never, it was always a little silly. I mean,
Sure.
the setting is never really explored in the movies, right? I mean, they get into it much later with all of the fan stuff, like all the stuff that comes after, right? Once it was successful. But they kind of just threw it out there and said, look, this all exists and don't question it. So that doesn't bother me. If they want to do that again with the new Star Wars movies, as they basically did, like, shut up, don't ask too many questions. There's this new evil empire, and
Just be a kid again. Enjoy it.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Fine. I'm not even going to question any of that. Go ahead. But they utterly betrayed the characters, all of the characters.
Mhm.
So you're done. You're done. If you do that, and now these characters are so beloved that you have no choice but to explain the characters, to show how they've progressed from the first movies to now, to show the relationships. And if you don't do that, no one's going to be happy.
I think my first red flag was everything leading up to The Last Jedi. Every interview with Mark Hamill almost looked like a hostage video. Like he was
Yeah.
screaming warnings
Yeah.
at people that this is not Luke Skywalker. This is some guy named Jake Skywalker. I'm like, what are you talking about? What's going on? So that should have been the moment where I realized, oh, they're going to mess this up. But I could have never.
Yeah. Look, if you want to turn Luke Skywalker into a kid fiddling terrorist, fine, you can do that. But I want to see how that happened. You're going to have to prove to me that what we knew as Luke Skywalker could become whatever it is that you're going to turn him into. You're going to have to show us that. You're going to have to make us believe that. So they didn't even try and do that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, one of the most popular pop culture characters ever. And all the articles after was like, oh, we just didn't know that Luke was this popular. Then why are you in control of this?
I know.
You should know this. So yeah, anyway, I could rant about that a while.
Yes, we could.
I think everyone our age, we just grew up on Star Wars. It was never going to be better than that, So yeah,
No.
a lot of people will be like, oh, you guys just hold that original trilogy sacred. And like, yeah, we do. Deal with it. Just like you guys, younger audiences, hold the Marvel movies sacred. It's your thing. It's what you grew up with, and that's always going to be ours. So we're always
we can think of other examples where Dune might be a good example. I know you're a huge Dune fan, and so am I. It's one of the few books that I reread. I almost never reread books, but I have read Dune probably half a dozen times.
I did number 13 right before the movie came out.
Jesus. Okay, so Dune is hard to make into a movie or TV series. I think we can agree on that.
Sure.
But the new movie's great.
Mm-hmm.
The old movie's great. I love the TV series. I don't care. I like it all. I know it's got its problems. I know we could criticize it, but they turned something that I loved, and they faithfully attempted to turn it into something for the screen. Anytime you do that, I'm on board. Even if you fail, even if you don't, but if you're faithfully trying to take the content and turn it into something that is trying to strike at the heart of the thing, all for it. Good for you. Thank you.
I think there was this video where Denny V, I always murder his name, so I just call him Denny V. It was almost like he was doing, like, if you watch a football game or American football where they're doing like the chalkboard showing, like they're circling stuff and showing you things. He did a breakdown scene like that of the Gom Jabbar scene. And 3 times in this like 15-minute video where he said that he was stuck, and he said what he did is he went back to the book. and he wanted to do what Frank Herbert would have done. I'm just like, I am so happy that my favorite book of all time had someone who cared that much about the book. Like, they're showing scenes of him like directing, and he's holding the paperback in his hand. So I was like, that's how I was never worried about that movie being good. I've seen his movies. I knew how much he had said this was his dream project. And all he ever kept saying is he wanted to make a movie that Frank Herbert would have been proud of. So yeah. I feel like we got that with Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And you see what Amazon's doing right now. You're like, yeah, not so much,
Yeah, Lord of the Rings is a perfect example where it's like, if it was true that, well, this was from our childhood and we just don't want it spoiled. I like the movies better than the books.
What I said is like, I'll always hold those books sacred, but I was like, the changes that he made for the movies, I'm kind of agreeing with most of the ones that he made,
He made them more succinct, more entertaining, more, the books have a kind of meat to them that the movies can never have, right? No matter how long you make the movies, you're never going to make them long enough to contain all of the brilliance that the books contain. But it took me, I did not enjoy the books. There's probably 30% of the books that I just loved. And there's probably 70% of the books where I kind of slogged through it. I loved the movies from beginning to end. They're great.
Wow. You cut me a little bit with that one.
Yeah.
All right, here I said every author is going to say that Tolkien, and I said you don't say Tolkien. Okay, all right. Well,
this is, and I'll shit on your next thing. Malazan. I recognize Malazan as a masterwork. I recognize the genius, but many of those books for me were just pure slog. Where I'm like, oh my god, can I make it? I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Every book in that, I think except Bone Hunters. Bone Hunters is the only one where I thought this was just awesome. This is what I wanted the whole time. But every book, because each one of those books has 4 parts, and I would say at least 2 of those parts are just like a drag. Like but the thing is, like, the other parts are so great that I will say, yeah, this is probably one of the most amazing fantasy series ever written. But it's hard to read. That's why I'm stuck on book 8 right now. It's
and
hard
I have to admit. In fact, I hadn't even read them. I had bounced off Garden of the Moon, like 3 times, until I talked with Philip Chase.
Oh, and he gave you the sermon, huh?
Yeah. Well, he was pretty. We talked about it. We talked about Malazan, not Malazan.
Oh yeah, Malazan. Yeah.
Sorry, Malazan. Jesus, I said.
He never corrects me, but he will always say it his way, and he'll let me say it mine. Yeah.
If he watches this, he was very good. He didn't even push it. But after that conversation, I'm like, all right, Christ's sake, I got to read some more, and I have been reading them since then. So, thank you, Philip, for the butt smack.
Philip's great. We're gonna be talking. Me and him will be talking about Beowulf tomorrow.
Okay.
We just read he actually like teaches Beowulf, and he knows like 6
luck.
languages and stuff. So I was like, so basically Philip's gonna be talking, and I'm gonna be nodding and smiling and be like, yeah, that part where he fought a dragon was cool. I'm gonna sound like a complete dullard, but you know what? I love Philip to pieces. I think he's one of the coolest guys I know, and I will happily sit back and learn whenever he talks to me about stuff. So that's the first time I read the Tolkien translation of Beowulf. But I read it for first time in high school, and I didn't understand nearly half as much of it as I understood this time. So I think Tolkien might have been better at putting it in words that I could understand, I think, than I'm not sure which translation I read in high school, but it was literally every 5 lines the teacher would be like, okay, what do these lines mean? And everyone was like, you tell us, you're the teacher. So
I'm not sure what they're doing in the education system, but if one were trying to design the perfect system to destroy a young mind's interest in literature, I think Beowulf would be one of the things I'd pick. Chaucer would be another. It's like, what the hell is this, and why are you teaching it to us?
Well, here's in high school, I was in the AP class, which was basically like college level for. It was funny. I was in dummy math, but I was in like genius literature and history. I think it's like one side of my brain worked and the other side didn't. That's kind of how it worked. And it's funny because now I work in math. Life is funny. But so we always would read things that the other classes weren't. And they're like, Beowulf, what are you talking? Beowulf, we're reading we ain't even reading. We watched the movie of Romeo and Juliet today. I'm like, yeah, must be nice. So I think that's where I actually developed an affinity more for classics. So I think in the regular classes, they didn't make anyone read. I think you would have like one book for the year that you had to read. It was usually like To Kill a Mockingbird or something really easy to get through.
Yeah,
Or
which
they could
makes
do like
sense.
Death of a Salesman. Now that's something that's like, oh God, why am I doing this? But hey, I agree.
Maybe, it's been a long time since I was in the 12th grade, obviously,
Same.
but hopefully they are adapting. I don't get the impression that they are, but why not get people to read interesting, fun fiction when they are young, so that they are ready to by all means, teach them the history of the English language if that's what you're doing. But they don't have to read Beowulf to understand the history of the English language. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And pretty soon I'm going to get on my soapbox.
I'm completely in favor of hey, let's dump Death of a Salesman, The Great Gatsby, and let's put like Dune on there, for the reading list or something.
I'm not sure if the education system has realized that there is a few hundred years of English literature.
Since they made those original reading lists, yeah.
So they could probably update that a little bit to capture the modern young mind a little better.
I think so, but I do appreciate a lot of classics. I've talked about on the channel. Like for a while there, I didn't talk about them because everybody, if it came out before like 1950, apparently we're not supposed to talk about it anymore. But I'm like, I don't know. I always appreciate, seeing where, like, I'm reading Edgar Rice Burroughs right now. And these stories are like 100 plus years old. And they're amazing. They're so forward. Where we were as a society, the stuff that he's put in his books is just like incredible. And I was like, I love looking at stuff that was written that long ago and seeing what these guys were right about, so it's fantastic to me.
And there's people who are gonna be like that. And if you can look behind me, it's filled with history books. And I am a history geek. I love the classics. I love all that stuff. But you do have to accept reality and realize that probably 90% of your young audience, you're going to turn them off rather than
sure.
stoking a love for literature. So probably you should ease them into it. I don't know.
Sure, it's like trying to force your music on your kids. They'll get there eventually. Like, you think I grew up loving the Beatles and Elvis and no, I had to go into it on my own. Before it was just, I was like rocking Van Halen and Guns N' Roses. I was like, get this Beatles stuff out of my face. And when I did get it, I was like, wow, I love this. So yeah, gotta let them learn on their own and think with a love of history. I feel like if you are a middle-aged male and you don't have some interest in history, eventually, I don't know, maybe you're just wired differently. But yeah, I think guys either become two things. They either become a lover of watching like history documentaries or grilling meats. It seems like it needs to be one of the two. Sometimes it's both, so.
Sometimes, good Lord.
Book deals coming in. See this?
Yeah. I wish.
Live on the air.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm at the farm, so as I say, I get a number of phone calls out here.
That's all right. If you've watched the channel at all, I don't do a lot of cuts. Stuff just happens. Sometimes my kids come in. It's really great. Makes for good.
Yeah. Well, I actually kicked the family out, so they're in the city. I have two young children, so it's pretty hard to do this without constant interruptions of noise.
So how about gaming? Do you do any of that?
I used to. I don't have that much time anymore. I used to be a huge video game guy. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was young too.
Sorry, I used to say I was a big dork, and I played all the dork stuff there could be, but I'd never touched D&D. And we finally got together and said, you know what? We're going to start this D&D game. We had like this 62-inch LED TV screen that we used for a map and everything. It was awesome. It was huge, right? And then pandemic, and we can't play together anymore. And so it was like I finally had said I'm going to embrace the last bit of nerd culture that I've been skipping out on.
Yeah,
and that happens. So yeah.
Well, it's funny if you find a fantasy writer, you almost always are going to hear them say, either full throated or in a slight mumble that they played Dungeons and Dragons when they were young.
I think Jim Butcher was more excited to talk about Dungeons and Dragons than he was about the Dresden Files. So yeah.
Funny. And I think a lot of us were dungeon masters too. A lot of them were DMs where they were making their own stories. I know that the Malazan books,
it's based off Dungeons and Dragons game. Wild.
So that is very common. And video games, I've been playing since the Commodore 64. So yes, I've always loved video games, and I'm happy to play them. But these days, I don't know. I don't seem to have a lot of time. Maybe when my kids get a little older, I can play something with them.
Yeah, I say I've got three hobbies: reading, gaming, and TV. And I only have time to do two of those at a time. Yeah. Reading never leaves. I'm going to keep doing reading. So I basically have to balance. Am I going to watch TV? I'm going to play a game, and it usually just ends up with me doing whatever my kids want to do anyway. So
yeah. Well, I seem to recall seeing a video of you talking about a muscle car or sports car. It seems like so. That must be another hobby of yours.
I mean, I couldn't tell you how they work. I just
Oh,
like
okay.
them.
You just
I've owned several muscle cars. It's just something that I'll never ever be able to get past, which sucks right now because I've got a Dodge Challenger RT, and it drinks gas like I drink coffee, and right now that's not fun. So I was
no.
like, wow, of course. Right when I buy a 8-cylinder, of course, this happens. But what can you do?
Yeah, what can you do? I'm not a car guy. I am from a farm, so I have a lot of experience with various machines, but I've always driven a piece of shit old car, and it breaks down and I get angry, and that's just the cycle.
Mm, yeah. See, when it comes to like fixing them, I couldn't tell you anything about them because I was raised basically by a single mother. My parents divorced when I was 5. Dad wasn't in the picture a ton. So I can tell you just about anything when it comes to kitchen, cooking, things like that. But when it comes to like fixing stuff, no
Yeah,
idea.
well, it's funny. Of my whole life, so my dad was a farmer and then a physicist, and so he can, if it's a piece of machinery, he can fix it. He was always, he could wire the house, he could do the plumbing. That's him. My brother is an electrical engineer who now sends satellites into space. So he can take apart car engines, and he can do all. So when I was young, I was always I'm the book guy, I'm the literature guy. I'm not an engineer. I am not interested in farming. So I was always kind of like, man, I don't know how to do anything. My brother and my father are so good at this stuff, and I'm an idiot. But then I met people who didn't live on farms, and I'm like, oh, I know much more than they do.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
funny how it's always relationship. It's always, in comparison.
Yeah. No, when it comes to fixing stuff, it was like my dad was a mechanic. So he handled that when I was younger. And like I said, then my parents split. It was just like,
That's out of the picture. That's
well,
gone.
he taught my brother how to work on cars. So he
Okay.
kind of took care of that. My brother was 6 years older than me. Still is. I mean, time hasn't actually lapsed that way. He hasn't went to any black holes recently, so there's been no time dilation. But yeah, and so he kind of handled that. So like I said, I was the baby, with mom. So yeah, I learned how to
Me
cook,
too. I was the baby.
and that's why it's one of those weird things that you get. I don't know how it states you get these stereotypes, like the women take care of the children and the man goes to work and the women cook. I was like, I cook. I pretty much take care of the entire kitchen at my house. But if there's a car that needs its spark plugs changed, my wife takes care of that. So it's
Yeah.
kind of backwards here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how these roles happen. Well, as I say, my wife's from the Philippines, so we're a bit more stereotypical, other than she's a nurse, and so she works. And it's just funny how that works. Whereas my mom was sort of a stay-at-home mom, and she was a concert pianist and a teacher when she was younger. But once she had kids, she just stayed home. And it's funny how those gender roles changed over time, even
Yeah.
in the last 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, when I was finishing business school, I was stay-at-home dad and doing, online schooling. So, I mean,
Living the
I don't think
dream.
it's not like this isn't 1965 anymore. This stuff doesn't work like that as many as
No.
people think. They know. I mean, uh, most dads I know are very involved in their kids' lives, and I was like, a lot of
Oh,
those stereotypes are just weird now, and it
when
just
I
goes
think
nowadays.
about my childhood versus the way that I interact with my children,
Yeah,
it's
same.
just
Well,
like,
see, coming from a divorced family, I said that was something that I wanted to make sure that I was very much involved in
yeah,
my kids' lives, and so that's why I will do stuff like let's talk about this Spider-Man movie for 4 hours because
yeah.
my kids will do that with me. So he's actually gotten my oldest is actually he's about to turn 10, so he started watching a lot of these movies that I love and stuff now.
That's great.
By the way, he says that Terminator 2 was the greatest movie ever made, and I'm like, that's a good pick. That's a very
That
good
is a
pick.
great pick.
Yeah. So all the ones I've showed him recently, I think Jaws, he's really liked a lot. He liked the first Matrix movie a lot, which I was blown away. I was like, I don't expect him to understand this. He figured it out about halfway through the movie. I was like, well, maybe I'm the dummy. I guess you got the brain. Must have skipped a
That's funny.
generation. So sharing that stuff with your kids is really, really awesome. But
Yeah.
when you get
I mean,
someone, my
I
wife's just
know.
relieved. Okay, great. Oh, thank God you got someone to talk comic books and Star Wars with now. Oh, thank God.
I get to share my secret passion, Peppa Pig, all the time with my kids. It's
Yeah.
great.
I was lucky. My kids, it was right when the MCU was blowing up, so they got into superheroes and stuff. So I was like, I got lucky there. And Star Wars was coming back, and we thought it was a good thing. You know, it was like, okay, well, they're just into the stuff I got. So I got to skip the Barney and the Thomas the Train and the Yo Gabba Gabba, all that weird stuff. You know, I got to skip all that. I got lucky there.
All right, so we've got Dune, we've got Lord of the Rings, we've got Star Wars. What are the other? You're a Stephen King fan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am essentially a Stephen King newbie. I think I've only read The Shining. So why should I read Stephen King, and what should I read? Like, what book should I read to get me hooked?
I think with Stephen King is there's a little something for everyone. Kind of just depends on what you're looking for. See, me, I love coming of age, and I think he writes coming of age better than any author ever. I love that subgenre. It's the best, and it's amazing because hasn't been a kid in many years, and he just writes kids to a point where it's just like, this is actually how kids talk to each other, and it's just so rare you can find an author that does that. They always write kids and things like, I never said that when I was a kid. No kid says this. No kids say this. Like, they're not waxing poetic and getting philosophical. They're talking about, Nintendo and boobs. That's what they were talking about, and he's never been afraid to do that. So that's what I've always liked about it. But with me, I've always said there's several places where you want to start. You want something scary, I say start with Pet Sematary. If you want something super hyper scary, because that's like more psychologically scary, you want something like super hyper scary, Salem's Lot, because it's vampires when they were still scary. If length isn't a problem, It is my favorite book but he's ever written, because it's got 7 coming of age stories in it. But The Stand is one that I always really will go back to, especially for fantasy authors, because I feel like it was just basically his love letter to fantasy set in a modern setting, a post-apocalyptic modern setting. But you see very many modern fantasy influences. And if that's really not what you're looking for, you want just like completely batshit crazy fantasy, The Dark Tower. The Dark Tower takes like science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and he mixes it all into a bowl and then says, oh, and here's all the 8 different subgenres of fantasy, and he just completely just throws it all in a blender and sees what happens.
All right. How many books are in the Dark Tower?
7.
Okay. All right.
You're breaking your 3-book rule there. The thing is, with Dark Tower, I feel like after book 2, you'll know if you want to keep going or not.
Yeah. Well, and my experience of Stephen King is that it's very readable. Whether it's so, I have a feeling that he would be easier to get through a 7-book series than many other writers.
And another one is another people I say, if you aren't really wanting horror, because there are people who believe that he just writes schlock, that he's not a good writer.
Yeah.
I always tell them, check out Different Seasons. It's a short story collection. It's got Shawshank Redemption. Obviously, everybody probably knows what that one is at this point. Apt Pupil, The Body, which is the movie Stand By Me was based off of.
Yeah.
That's a great place to start, and it will show you this guy can write. He can write.
He can.
No horror in it at all.
And so I'm not one of those writers or people that say, "Oh, this writing style is."
The super popular author actually isn't good. Yeah.
No. If you are a writer worth your salt, you should recognize people making choices, right? Not everybody's trying to write like Raymond Carver. Not everybody's trying to write like. You can go down the list. We're not writing like Irish short stories. Okay, they're trying to produce mainstream books for people who are. It's going to be accessible. The plot is the point. The characterizations is the point, and they're just trying to help them get through. So these days we call that sort of like workman-like. There's always these ways to describe that. That people will say. They're not trying to say like it's very plain language. But there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to write like Brandon Sanderson, go for it.
I was about to say, you said workman-like. He's got to think about, you mean like Brandon Sanderson, who's like, oh, by the way, I've got 4 books that you didn't know about that were coming out.
Yeah, and it is so funny, the reaction to that. Again, I don't know if it's jealousy. I don't know what it is exactly.
Oh, people mad about his Kickstarter?
I saw so many writers coming out and being mad at Brandon Sanderson for coming out with 5 books. And I'm thinking, why don't you just shut up and write more books?
I thought it was shocking to me just because I knew it was authors I knew. I could see if it was ones that were just like trying to get some publicity out of it or something, but it was like writers I knew. And I'm like, are you kidding? I've heard of Brandon Sanderson as like the nicest freaking guy on the planet.
Yeah.
And he takes the time. He talks to his fans. He gives them constant updates. He makes his tiers on his Kickstarters worthwhile, and he has a loyal fan base. It's just jealousy. And I love what did you see what Mark Lawrence said about it?
I think I missed it.
Well, basically, he ripped everyone that really badly.
Good.
That was saying
Good
like,
for him.
instead of being a jerk to Brandon Sanderson, maybe you can use this as an opportunity to say, hey, other fantasy authors use Kickstarter as well. This might be someone's introduction to Kickstarter, and you could actually ride that wave instead of being jealous about it.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I think I remember, this is not going to work because Mark Lawrence is British, but I remember hearing a story, the difference between an American and a Brit. And he was saying, the American sees a guy driving in a beautiful convertible. He walks up and he says, "Oh man, nice car. What do you do for a living? How did you get this thing? How do I get it?" In other words, whereas the Brit swears at him and kicks the tire and walks off. And so Mark Lawrence is obviously an exception to that rule, but I will say that I noticed a lot of British writers acting stereotypically in that regard, where they're just like, fuck you, Brandon Sanderson. Whereas I saw a little, there's sort of the more American dream, and this is true of Canadians too, the more just like, good for you.
I've always said, I was like, I've never been like, oh, well, that person's got something I want, F them. I'm like, God, man, I'd love to get there someday. I mean, like, I look at other content creators and I'm like, man, I would love to have that audience, and then I realize, maybe I don't, because that's a lot of, my audience is, I feel like I don't have time to respond to, all the messages and emails and comments that I get anymore, and I'm thankful that people want to talk to me about that stuff. I just really don't have the time once I went back to work. I started this when I was finishing school and I had extra time. But yeah, you got to put in the work for the bigger your audience gets. And I was like, if I had that audience 200, 300, 400,000 subscribers, I don't know that I could handle it and my job and be a decent spouse and father.
Yes. I just gave up being a decent spouse and father.
Something had to go. It's kind of like I said about my hobby. You can only do a couple of these at a time. You're not going to quit writing, right?
it would be fair to say that I do have a very understanding wife. There's no question about that. Writing is a strange profession, and it's why I love doing these types of things so much, because I get to talk to people who are interested in some of the same subjects that I'm interested in. Usually I'm just sitting in my basement alone, like muttering to myself. That's what I do for a living. And it's not good for the mental health sometimes.
Yeah, I think my spouse, when I first started doing this, she was like, whatever, because I podcasted for years before this. I mean, obviously people are like, oh, you gift of gab, as you put it. So yeah, ramble on podcasts for a decade and you learn how to fill out the blank spaces. But it never really took off. Never. It was so hard to find a footing in podcasting.
Yeah.
And it never really took off. So when this actually started to get some attention, I said, okay, well, I want to put some work into it. And startups, a lot of work. And we had a newborn,
I know,
really. And it was like, and he's special needs. So he required a lot of work, so it was like, okay, you're going to go do another one of these things that don't matter. And then once it got reported, she started seeing some of the messages and people telling about like how I changed her life and stuff like that. And now she's all for it. She's supportive. Now there is some times where, I'm like, I got to miss that Boy Scouts meeting, where she's like, understandably so. So, but yeah, you got to have a good support system. So that's great that she's understanding.
Yeah, well, at least you had your real job. When I quit my job, I was with my wife. And so imagine your husband goes from making a perfectly reasonable salary to making nothing, essentially. And I did that for 2.5 years before I made basically a penny. So that's a tough sell.
Yeah, I don't know if I could have done. Now, if I had just said, "Yeah, I'm just going to do this for you," I just graduated college, but I'm just going to do this instead of going and getting a real job. Now, I don't think that it would have went over as well as it has.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't succeed at all, right? I mean, it's funny. I think I saw a video with it's another YouTuber. You probably heard of him, Mr. Beast. He's like this young guy. Okay. Anyways, he was like 11 years old when he made his first YouTube video. He was this totally socially awkward, sort of almost useless human being who all he could do, or all he was interested in, was these YouTube videos. He was failing school. His mother was ready to just disown the kid practically. He got to university. Because his parents made him go. He wasn't even going to his classes. He'd just like go to his car and try and make YouTube videos. And then all of a sudden, he got a huge following. And by the end, I don't know, he's got like 50 million subscribers now. He's an unbelievable success. But until that moment, right, he was crazy. He was a lunatic. He
Right.
was completely off. And then suddenly, oh, he's successful. Congratulations, well done. And he's a perfectly normal figure. And everybody, we never treated you like you were crazy. What are you talking about? That's kind of how life is. You're crazy until you succeed.
Hmm. Hmm. No, that's well put. Because I think with me doing all this side stuff was always just like, I just want some entertainment. I just want something to kind of as a hobby. I feel like at the time I still believe, because I started with sports podcasting because I really believed I was going to work in sports radio. I always did, and then I just kind of got sick of it because our professional sports teams were lousy. That helped a lot too. But and then I moved to like media because I love talking about comics and movies and video games, all that stuff, and did that for years. Wrote about it, did some writing. Realized I wasn't a good writer, but I could talk. So that was just kind of what I did. But I always loved to read, and my podcast host wasn't really, outside of comic books, he wasn't really reading a lot of books. So I just kind of did this as like it was going to be like a supplemental thing to that. And then he had a kid, and he was like, I just can't be I can kind of flake out a lot on my schedule. So I don't know about the podcast. So I said, oh, we can just put it on a hiatus. It's still on that hiatus because, apparently people like hearing what I think about books. It's weird. It's really weird. So this YouTube thing.
Yeah, well, you've just sort of gone independent. You're like an independent radio guy now or something.
I am so glad because radio, the turnover rate on that is just insane. So I'm glad that I feel like this and podcasting has really given people like me an outlet to do stuff like that. And people think that we make money off this. I mean, look, if you are one of those huge channels, like you're Mr. Beast guy, I'm sure he's a millionaire, So I mean, sure, if you've got that much support, sure, you're probably doing okay. Me, this isn't even, and this is before recent times. This isn't even gas money for me, guys. So yeah, this is a labor of love from me. I love talking to other people about books because I don't know anyone in real life that likes to read. So that was why
I have a similar problem. Where I'm from, it's sort of the salt of the earth, blue collar type of people. And, it's just, you don't find people here who like to read fantasy. You don't really find people who are into these types of things. And so it's a very strange profession for someone to be in, though there are some great Canadian writers, Guy Gabriel Kay, but I don't know where that comes from exactly. How do you go from living in this frozen plains, to writing fantasy? It's kind of a strange combination.
Steven Erickson's from those parts as well, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So Guy Gabriel Kay, I'm glad you brought that one up. That's an author I haven't dipped into yet. And it seems like on my Discord server, people mostly love, or they just, no, it's not for me. So where do you think I would fall on this? I mean, not that exactly, my likes or dislikes, but you think there's just someone who likes adult fantasy is going to be into his books? Because I mean, I've talked to Nicholas Eames, and he just could not say enough great things about the guy.
Yeah.
So is he just like a Canadian legend or what?
He is kind of a Canadian legend. Yes, he is. What is his style? His prose is excellent. So are you a prose guy? Do you care?
I'm not a snob. I mean, I appreciate good writing. Like I think Patrick Rothfuss, obviously his writing style is beautiful. I love Ray Bradbury. That's one of my favorite writers ever. And I think his prose is magnificent, but I'm never one who's reading something like, oh, this prose is so awful. And I've never done that. Never. No, if I'm doing that, you must be really, really bad. Like Stephanie Meyer or something. Yeah.
So I would say his main things are that he's excellent prose. And the second is that he's one of these almost classic, how do I describe this? Classic storytellers where he weaves mini stories into the grander narrative. So you have tons of mini stories, so that each couple of chapters, you're wrapping up a smaller beginning, middle, end, leading into a larger collective. So there's always something happening. Neil Gaiman. Have you ever read Neil Gaiman?
I read Stardust last year.
He's a little bit like that. I would compare him to a Neil Gaiman, where sometimes it feels like it's getting out of control. Sometimes you're sort of wondering what the point is. You know, sometimes you're just experiencing these mini stories one after another. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
No. Well, I mean, I have Tigana, and I can't never remember the other book. A viewer actually sent it to me, but I never really got a real answer on where I should start from people. They always reel off like 4 or 5 books. That's not telling me where to start with Guy
No,
Gardner.
oh God, where would I start with? I don't
With
even
me,
know.
someone who's looking for standalones, because there's
Yeah,
no standalones anymore.
well, he does. He has standalones.
I need to check more of that.
Yeah, but I would try him out. I think he's got some standalones. Just go find one. They're sort of all similar in style.
All his books are the same.
That's right.
That's the best sales pitch ever, right there. So
yeah.
so
Well,
are
I
you
haven't read
writing
one of
right
his books
now?
in years.
Are you writing right now?
Yeah, I'm actually writing a completely unrelated project.
Oh, okay. So it's not in the same universe. Okay.
No, and it's a completely different style as well. It's sort of a lit RPG. I don't know if you know what that is.
I'd never heard about it, and now I can't stop hearing about it. I think that's like the Drizzt novels. Is that supposed to be what it is?
It's so the idea is it's kind of video game esque.
Yeah.
Hence literature role-playing game, that lit RPG, that's what it stands for. So you're bringing in some kind of video game element into the story. Sometimes it's very obvious that you're doing this, and somebody's going to get plus to their stats, like they're almost leveling up as they go through the book. I'm not doing that, but I've got more subtle elements, let's put it that way. But that is the idea. So there's going to be a lot of action. There's a lot of a character going through these situations where he's having to power up almost as he goes through.
No, I asked that when people first told me about lit RPGs. I was like, "What are you like? Are you like grinding for a certain armor or something?" I'm like, what are we doing here? What are you talking about? I mean, is this turn based? Is it like fight or heal or run? I mean, what's going on? So.
Yeah, well, there's it's a wide genre at this point where you can get just about anything you can imagine in it. There's sort of more subtle aspects like mine, and then there's more hard, sort of almost like the hard fantasy version where it's like he completed a task and he got +1 strength. So mine is much more on the soft side, but I don't know what I'm doing. Somebody called it Senlin Descends. I don't know if you know what Senlin Ascends.
It's Josiah Bancroft.
Mm-hmm. But the premise of the story basically is there's sort of this frontier town where there's an old mine that is abandoned that essentially has a portal in it that goes to hell. And so people come from all over this country because it's believed that there's sort of wealth and riches to be gained, to delve down into this hell portal, trying to make money doing it. And the people who live in this town are sort of like the people who sell the equipment to the gold panning people, the frontiersmen. So that's kind of the premise. And the character who lives in this town, his friends decide one day that they're going to go down and become wealthy themselves, and they go down into hell and they get lost, and he's got to go down and get them.
Sounds like the sci-fi version of Deadwood.
I call the town Tristwood.
Nice. So it's like Al's Bar has the 9th gate in it. Okay, awesome. I'm there for it.
It's a little bit Diablo and it's a little bit Deadwood. Yes.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I love Western movies, love them to death, but I've never really been able to get into Western books. It's so weird, except Dark Tower, which I don't really consider that, because just because you got a cowboy in it doesn't mean it's a Western, really.
Okay. Well, I need to read Dark Tower immediately, because the protagonist of this story is a little bit Wild West gunfighter. He's there's not guns, but he has this sort of the attitude of a Wild West gunfighter.
Roland, the main character of the Dark Tower, is basically Clint Eastwood in the Sergio Leone movies.
Yeah. Okay. So you will be right at home in this story.
Okay. All right. So I tried doing what was it, Blood Meridian, and it just did not work for me. Did not care for it whatsoever. But I do want to read Lonesome Dove. That's on my bucket list. I would love to read Lonesome Dove.
Yeah, the Westerns are great. I never really read much when I was young, but I have read some, and yeah, I think the great thing about fiction, and people don't read broadly enough. If you get somebody who just reads fantasy, or just read,
it's hard to get out of that. But I need those. Get out of those ruts. Like, for example, you were just bringing up lit RPG. Something I'd heard about yesterday that I've never heard of. I started reading this series.
Oh yeah.
Cradle, and someone told me it's something called progressive fantasy, and I'm like, What the hell does that mean? I have never even heard of that. And they're explaining it to me, which basically what I heard was, oh, it's a written word anime, basically is what it is. Oh, okay. Well, that was much easier said than progressive fantasy. So yeah, when it comes to subgenres, I'm just like, it's adult fantasy or it's not adult fantasy. That's where I've gotten now.
I don't even like genres. I don't, I just use them because it helps readers and helps marketers understand like what the hell are you talking about. But I think most writers don't even really think in terms of genre, particularly in the indie market. We just write whatever it is we want to write, and then we package it so that people know what they're sort of getting into. That's what.
Would you ever mingle with horror?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's funny. I don't know if this is true of most writers or most artists, but we tend to change. We write a thing, and then we're done with it, and we move on. More or less at the same time that people are going, I really like that. Would you write more of that? And we're going, no, we're on to the new thing. So it's kind of a difficult balance to strike where you're trying to write the stuff that people are used to and know you for and they're enjoying, but you tend to want to evolve. That tends to be the character of someone who does this.
I think, I can't remember who it was. I talked about this with Mr. Rocchio, was that there was a sci-fi writer who was saying he had no regrets about his career, except that he wished he had wrote a fantasy series because fantasy series get to have awesome maps in their book, and those are way cooler than star charts. That's true. Maps are really cool.
Yeah, maps are hard. I did make maps for King's Paradise, but
did you draw your own maps?
Yeah, I used some software to do it.
Nice.
Yeah,
if I did it, would just look like a golf course.
Well, if I didn't use the software, that's what it would have looked like. Yes.
I was curious about that because I know that when I talked to Rocchio, he said he was interested in maybe moving to fantasy with his next series, or Pierce Brown's finishing up Red Rising, and then he's talking about doing a hard fantasy series and stuff. So it seems like sci-fi fantasy, obviously there's some wiggle room there, but I'm always like, you guys ever think about moving into horror at all? And I feel like horror is just like a genre that just doesn't get any respect, like whatsoever. I hate that.
Yeah, it's hard to understand why that is exactly. It's a big market. There's lots of people who read horror books.
Unless they just want to just basically copy H.P. Lovecraft, it just seems like everyone's just like, I don't want to do any horror. It's just like they treat the movie genre of horror like that.
Who are the big modern horror writers who are pumping out books?
That's the thing. Couldn't tell you. I'm not really plugged in with it. There's a lot of them, but I couldn't tell you any that I read. I tried Omakatsu. That didn't work. I don't like to be shitty about books at all. It's just, I think that the idea, you being a history guy, okay, the Donner Party, about the Donner Party, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I think that story is horrific enough as is. You could have just done an actual dramatized version of the Donner Party. But if this book, she tries to make the Donner Party be like, oh, it was like zombieism, and that's why they were eating each other because they were starving. They were fucking starving, So it just frustrated me. That was like some weird horror twist that you didn't need to put into a already horror story. So that's what frustrated me about that. So I think stuff like that. I've heard this genre now called horror fiction or historical horror fiction. And I'm like, that's not going to be for me, because she did another one that was like on the Titanic, and I'm like, all right, no, I know that's just probably not going to be an author for me. But you know what? She's got a market that's working for her. Good for her. But really, horror for me has just been Lovecraft and King. Really, so I just started trying some Clive Barker like this past year, and I found he's way more fantasy than horror now. So I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to try some new ones later this year. I got Christopher Buhlman I'm going to be trying. I know he's really tearing it up right now. And Laird Barron, I think is his name. So there's several I'm going to try. But outside like King and Anne Rice, I never really got into very many other newer horror writers. So
I really enjoyed Anne Rice. I don't think I've read Interview with the Vampire, maybe one other book. I can't remember now, but I don't know. I'm going to try some Stephen King. We'll see if I can get into the horror. But it's funny, one thing I've noticed when you're a writer, if somebody likes your book and they're in the reviewing blogging world, whatever their specific thing is that they like, they're like, hey, have you tried writing the thing I'd like you to write? And you're like, okay, I'll think about it. I'll try it.
No, fantasy is my favorite. I just like to say that there's so many fantasy writers now I'm just always
Yeah.
curious if they would be interested. Like I think Brian Lee Durfee said his next book is going to be a horror book, and I just thought that was a really refreshing answer that I've never gotten before. So I was just curious if like horror is like agreeing to do like a sci-fi channel movie for an actor. It was like you just feel like that's just like scraping the bottom of the barrel or something, you know? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, my white whale is historical fiction. One day I'll write some historical fiction, but it's so goddamn hard
You
because
have a
you
time
actually,
period or a culture that you got in mind?
oh, so many choices,
Because with
really.
me, if it's anything to do with like 11th century Scandinavia, I'm there. I will check it out for sure. You know, that's why I can't wait to watch The Last Kingdom, the last season of The Last Kingdom. You know, and I
Yep.
love Vikings, so
Yeah. Well, these are great, though they've been done a lot.
yeah.
I'm sort of a, contrarian. I like to do things that are either not done or that people are triggered by a little bit. So I'd pick something like, colonial, which is just as a topic would already send some people off,
Oh, sure, sure.
just investigate that. And so I like to pick periods of history that are not as sort of well known, and because there's so much out there, and it's just, to me, it's so fascinating that I don't know. I don't know what I'd pick. Maybe some conquistadors.
Maybe some ancient Egypt. That'd be pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah,
You'd
that'd
be
be great.
surprised. That's not really it's tapped. Every time anybody does anything about Egypt, they always want to go Stargate with it, which I love. Don't get me wrong, but they always want to go sci-fi with it and be like, "Oh yeah, aliens," you know. And
God, it's hard, and this is true when you write fantasy too. When you try and get people into the headspace of a culture that existed thousands of years ago, we don't realize just how much culture influences how we think.
Hmm.
We think, well, people more or less are the same, and they've thought more or less the same throughout all of human history, right? We know what a good person is and what a bad person is, and they either live up to that or they don't. And trying to get a modern English reader's head into the head of an Egyptian 5,000 years ago, it's trying to show them what a hero looks like in that culture. It's very difficult. It's a tricky thing to do.
Right, and that's when people have a problem with books that were written in 1913. You know, like yeah, I don't think you're going to have a good time if they try to get like actually historically accurate with some of these things. Yeah, because it's
Yeah,
just,
well, the example I like to use is slavery, where we think, okay, slavery obviously bad,
Mhm.
and people have always known and always agreed that slavery is bad. There's just evil people who did it anyways,
Mhm.
right? That's kind of the attitude of the modern world. It's like, that's just not true.
Yeah, I
People,
talk about whenever, anytime I make a Lovecraft video, I always get. I mean, or someone sent me an Ayn Rand book the other day, and someone got
yeah,
mad about it, and
yeah.
I was like, you have to look at these things. Mainly, I would say this about Lovecraft is he was a man of his time. It wasn't unusual
As we all
at
are.
that time, you know. And so I was like, I've never once done one of his books and been like, man, the guy really had a great personal life, didn't he? You know, I just been like, he was like the precursor for just about every form of horror that we have, you know. So that's why I always go back to or Edgar Allan Poe, you know, and just yeah, they lived in a completely different world. And you have to think about what the things that they believed back then wasn't unusual, you know?
Yeah, I mean, people have believed a lot of crazy shit, and we still do. That
Yeah, in 200 years, I'll be like, people were actually eating plants. Are you kidding?
Yeah, absolutely. Who knows what it'll be, right? It'll be, just don't judge your ancestors too harshly, because we, assure you that your descendants will judge you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the story of history. Hell, your kids judge you. It only takes one generation
Oh, no
before your kids are
kidding.
like, man, the old man's an idiot.
Yeah, try to talk to your kids about what it was like before the internet or before tablets or before Netflix. Yeah, yeah.
I like to tell the story. My mother used to talk about this. She came from a small farm, right, in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. They had no electricity. So when she grew up, she came from a life where they had no electricity, where they took a horse to school. And before she died, she lived in a world where there's space junk. I mean, that's in one lifetime to go from that level of technology. And not that they didn't have electricity in the world, but she didn't have it, to a world where we have such technology that there's too much crap in space and it's a problem. It's just absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, I was watching that. There's an Elvis Presley documentary on HBO called The Searchers. And I was watching some of that. My kid was kind of like curious. So he's like, I know grandma and you really like Elvis a lot. So I'll watch a little bit of it. And everything kept being like, oh, well, why aren't there better recordings? I mean, it's like I can get a better recording. You can get a better recording of this with your phone and stuff. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't like that in 1956. And to him, it's like 1956 sounds like 1913 to me. That sounds like a completely different world. So yeah, it's always unusual because like my kid, he got grounded and he's bored. He's just walking around the house, didn't know what to do without his tablet or without his Nintendo Switch. And part of you wants to be like, oh, well, I got to find something for him to do. And the other part, I'm like, go color, go do something.
Go play
go
with
do a
dirt.
Puzzle, bro. That's the kinds of things that we had to do. That was high entertainment for us. Read a book, so yeah.
I think we should caption this video. 2 old men complain about the youth.
I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, yeah, you sound like an old man. And I can agree with that. But, as much as we gripe about how great things used to be back then, you know what? I like that. Okay. My K-cup that I used to do replaceable coffee grounds broke. You know what I did? I went like this and I went like this and boom, there's a new one coming tomorrow. I don't want to go back to the old way. I love being able to do that, So
no,
I embrace modernism just fine.
Yes, well, it goes back to what I was saying, that like this is the greatest time to be alive. I'm not trying to say we don't have our problems. We do, and we've always had problems throughout the history of humanity. It's like child mortality is nothing in the modern West. Okay.
Yeah, women aren't dying delivering babies anymore, you guys. It really wasn't that long ago they were.
No, it really wasn't. That people don't understand that it was not long ago, that we were completely different. Even in my mother's generation. And, if you go back one more than that, society would be almost unrecognizable. The way that people thought was almost unrecognizable. I have a new obsession where I watch videos from YouTube that are the oldest interviews that are available on video. So it'll be some like Irish farmer from, 1890 or, some like old grainy black and white thing where they can get them. And it'll be the oldest guy they can find and the oldest video that it exists. So it'll be a guy who's like 90 years old in one of the first videos ever made. And he'll be talking about when he was a kid. And this guy is talking about living on a farm in Ireland where the Lord has kicked them off the land and men with clubs are beating pregnant women off the fields, basically saying you can't live here anymore because the serfs are disappearing. This was a guy who's on video still. Yeah. And it's like, just listen to this guy, okay? And recognize that he was essentially a serf. We don't even understand what a serf is anymore, right? It's like it's insane.
Yeah, it is. So I will occasionally, old man shakes fist at cloud. I'm guilty of that just as much as everyone else, but I also will be that person and be like, we can say I need to go to a city 900 miles away and you can still do that in a day. I so like we're living in the best time, guys. You got to accept.
And you can sip champagne as you get there.
Yeah. And you're never hungry and the climate's always controlled. It's not that bad. So yeah, that's why a lot of it, like, how can you always stay so positive when so many bad things are going on? Yes. I focus on the positive. I don't know.
Yes, well, that's a very valid point that people can make, that there are lots of places in the world where it's not true, that it's very difficult still in these places.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, but if you are living in the English-speaking world and you are reading my fantasy book, you're not one of them. So I can guarantee you, if you are reading my book, you are a privileged human being. Be content, be happy. Go out and try and find your own purpose and your own happiness, but recognize that you are a very fortunate individual. And I'm hoping what I'm trying to do with my books is to tell you that you should be happy and satisfied with your own life because of that. I'm not trying to depress someone when they're reading this grimdark book. There's always hope in these books, because I'm trying to say, look, life is good and you can make it even better.
Well, that hope must be in the sequel books, because in book 1, I wasn't finding a lot of hope. I mean, I guess that a certain character didn't get his cut off, but other than that,
you got to keep reading, man. It's always darkest before the dawn.
Yeah. So that is, I do have some stuff that I'd already planned to do over the summer, but I do have them on the schedule for this fall, and I'm excited to go back there. I think you said something about, oh, you know what? Let me get this Frank Lister story. So I don't audiobook. Okay. I don't have reading ADD, but I have listening ADD. It comes with being married and having kids, you just learn to block things out and you don't listen. You can't turn that off. Anyhow, but I do know Frank Lister is one of the best in the business.
Ralph Lister.
It's a name. Ralph, I'm sorry. Frank, what am I thinking? Frank Muller, Ralph Lister. I think that's how I got it mixed. Okay. I do know the name. So obviously, I think that he's one of the better ones in the business. First, I've heard he's very expensive. And second, what was the story with? I know that when books 2 and 3 came, he was not going to do it, but now he has done them. So was there like a story behind this, or was it just like a logistics thing?
It's mostly logistics, but I guess in the first place, he is the narrator of my favorite book, which is Shogun by James Bell. Which is
I have it, but haven't delved into that bad boy yet.
Definitely recommend that if you ever want to break into historical fiction. And so when I was writing my own books, when I was figuring out the audio situation, I thought almost as a lark, like, maybe I'll send Ralph Lister an email and see if he's available. So that's what I did. And I said, hey, I'm some guy. Do you want to narrate my book? Thinking that he would sort of, if he responded, that
Marcus spam.
yeah, right. Or if he responded at all, that he would sort of politely tell me to fuck off. But instead, he said, sure. Here are my dates. Here are my, just told me what his schedule was. And even then I thought, okay, well, it's hard to afford him. And, what's the experience going to be like? Is he going to pay very much attention to this? Is it worth it? Like he might not treat me as his most crucial project. Let's put it that way. But he was absolutely the most professional, most pleasant individual you'll ever experience. And it's funny because I had this kind of a preconception of what an actor would be like, as sort of this diva, sort of an individual, just from, I don't know, years of cultural experience telling me that that's what these actors are like.
Sure.
The exact opposite is he was just the most polite, most social character you've ever experienced, who walked me through the process, who told me what he wanted, who gave me the impression that this was the most important project that he had on his list. I'm sure that's not true, but that's how I felt. And just did a great job.
Did he actually ask you for like feedback? Like, what does this character think? Did this name sound the same and stuff like that? Yes. Saying the names right?
And he told me what he wanted from me. He asked for a synopsis. He asked for a breakdown of the character voices. Like he said, the more you can give me, the better this will be.
That's great.
So he was really me who was needing to provide him with all this content. I'm like, oh shit, because sometimes as the writer, you don't really think about what the voice of a character sounds like. You might have a kind of an idea, but this guy really wanted it to be specific. So I'm coming up with the details, like, is he confident? Is he, does he have a rasp to his voice? Is it young? Is it old? Is it what? So he's coming up with all those details. You have to worry about accents. You've got to worry about how to pronounce it. I had to give him a pronunciation guide where I went through every word that was kind of a made up fantasy word. And he kept that consistent when he actually did books 2 and 3. The only reason he did not do books 2 and 3 quite quickly is because I was a little bit worried about the financial implications of
it.
Were they making, did it make sense to do it? But he actually, he's the one who came back to me and said, hey, do you want to do more of a profit share model? Essentially. So he and I are splitting the profits on book 2 and 3.
Great. Wow. Sounds like an awesome, because other authors I've talked to, they've been like, yeah, they don't ask me for nothing. They didn't ask for feedback on names or anything.
So it would depend how they did it. Like, because I did it independently, it was just Ralph and I coming together and saying, hey, let's do it. Whereas if you go through a publisher, you've got all these middlemen and you're not interacting with the narrator one-on-one. And, it's just a different model.
More of who's available. Yeah.
And they probably have 15 projects on the go. And whereas I could pick up the phone and call this guy if I wanted to. Like, we were interacting back and forth, and it was, that's why the indie model is so great.
So you said something about when we emailed about a month ago to set this up, you said something about wanting to give away some of those Audible credits. Is that still on the table?
We can absolutely do that. Yes. I did not think about the details before we did this, and I should have, but we can give away some audiobook credits. We can do one book, all 3 books, whatever you like. Okay.
Well, I'm sure that I will find some people that are interested, because there are a lot of people on my Discord who only listen. They will not read. So there were some people that were concerned when I told them that you only had the first book done on audio. They were like, "Oh, well, then I'll just wait." So when I saw that he had done them, I was very excited that there was going to be more people that would be interested in doing that. But yeah, I'm sure I can find some victims for you that are
Yeah, well, we
that
can
really
do
take those off your hands.
Patreons, or we can do random lottery, whatever you like.
I think that we can work that out, but I don't have very much else. I mean, I could probably talk all day, but I'm starting to run out of fuel here because I only got one coffee instead of two.
I
And
am also running out of fuel.
I
Well,
don't want to keep you from writing because I know you got ideas. Just this conversation has just ideas bubbling like right now, right? I mean,
well, one thing you always have to say to people when you're interacting with a writer, if you're friend or family, you are pretty much always auditioning to be a character.
oh, nice, nice. Okay. Hey, Joe Abercrombie did have a character named Admiral Kearns in one of his books. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I know it has nothing to do with me, but it's so cool.
Yeah, it's funny when you
Because
see
you
your
don't see a
name.
lot of, if you do see the usage of Kearns, you see the Irish spelling, which is Kearns. And my ancestors thought it would sound more American to lose the A when they came here. I have no idea why, but again, like you're talking about, it's a different world with our ancestors, right? They have no idea why they did what they did. So
Yeah,
just
yeah.
things like that.
Well, I appreciate the invite. I love having these conversations, and I'm a big fan of the channel. So you can look forward to me coming back. Other than your Discord, which I can't navigate because I'm too old.
Well, it's one of those things like when I first got on it, I was like, I'm not going to use this. And now it's like the only one I do use because I can enforce rules on there that keep everybody nice. You can't do that on some of the other major social media
Yeah, well,
sites.
I kept up for a while. I used to be doing BBCs, and I was on social media, but now I keep it limited. I just do the ones that I like, and there's only so much capacity for learning that I have left.
What I've told everybody is like if you're a public figure, man, I would stay away from Twitter. It's just
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to end well for anyone who has a following whatsoever on there. But
Well, we can save those conversations for next time, maybe.
yeah,
But yes, you are right to be wary of all social media,
yeah.
and
And
it's
I also
it's
think that if
pretty
I was a
fun.
writer, I would stay away from social media just because I feel like it would be a time drain. It would make me lose my focus too much. Because I think
Yes.
when I first bought a Kindle, I said I wanted to get away from reading on my iPad, not just for eye strain, but also the distractions. Because I would always be like, oh, well, let me look that word up. And then I would end up checking my email. And then, oh, let's see what's on Instagram. It's a distraction. So, yeah, I think that if I was a writer, like when I do work from home, I close everything out and I just have my work stuff open. So,
Yeah, I gave up. I don't have a smartphone.
oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I went full dinosaur
Really
mode.
are out there in the wild, wild west.
Yeah, because I'm sort of an addictive personality. I recognize that, and so I know that if I have this thing, I sort of can't stop looking at it. I can't. So the only way to get rid of it or to deal with it is to get rid of it. So
So you still
that's
rocking a flip phone?
yes, I am.
Man, that's so vintage.
Yeah.
Outstanding. I like it.
It's funny though when I get to these situations where somebody's like, "Oh, you just got to scan the QR code or
Yeah.
whatever," and I'm like,
You about
uh,
that. Yeah.
"You got a piece of paper?"
Yeah. All right, Rick. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and I look forward to talking after I complete the trilogy this fall sometime. We will definitely get back together and talk about it, and maybe we'll do some spoilers. I don't know, and where I probably will be like, "Why did you kill my character?" I figure that'll probably happen because it doesn't seem like it's a very forgiving world. We'll see. We'll see. But again, thank you so much, and I'll get with you about getting those audible codes and whatever we're going to do for
Sounds good.
that.
My pleasure, sir.